Hey there, Kickstarter. Douglas Costello here,
And Ian Costello.
and we're here to take you through the building of the Dungeon Master Hero Vault. One of my favorite design strategies whenever I'm approaching a new project is to look at historical examples and sort of look for inspiration in the past. For the Dungeon Master Hero Vault, I chose to look into medieval armor. There were a great deal of gorgeous tournament armors and parade armors that were gilded and etched and just show a real level of craftsmanship and ornamentation that are hard to match. And as I was researching tournament armors, I came across this gilded helmet. This gilded helmet was made in 1555 for the Holy Roman Emperor at the time, and there was just a pattern on this helmet that really caught my eye, and I thought would be a really interesting motif to explore. So I took out my trusty digital camera and I took a quick photo and switched it to black and white and printed it out. And then I started tracing with just good old fashioned tracing paper. After I had roughly sketched it in, I put another piece of tracing paper on top of that piece of tracing paper, and I used just some French curves to sort of even out all the curves. And I just needed just an eighth of a segment because this is a repeating pattern. So I just got an eighth of a segment done, and then in Photoshop I was able to then mirror that around a central point, and that's how I got the final design. At that point, I brought the design over to my brother Ian, and we got to talk about which materials would sort of fit this design, and we settled on using English wych elm burl, holly, ebony, and a mother of pearl for the center. Yeah.
So we went into the wood shop to collect our different veneers. If you're interested in how we made all the veneers, we have another video on the Masterwork Vault where we cover that in depth. All the veneers that we used for this, we did make ourselves in the shop.
Because this is a repeating pattern, just like I was able to mirror one section of the pattern to create the entire motif, Ian was going to take just a quarter of the pattern, stack up the veneers, and as he cut out one, he'd actually be cutting out the entire pattern all at once.
Yeah, that's right. And, the stack cutting works really great on a repeating design because, for exactly the reason that he drew it that way. You're going to get consistency all the way around where, a person sawing out that whole design, there's definitely going to be some inconsistency from one side to the other.
And now Ian is taking the stacks of veneer over to the scroll saw. Ian, why don't you tell us about the challenges of sawing this amount all at once?
Yeah, there can be a couple challenges with sawing things like this. The blades are very small, like very fine. We use number 2/0 blades. So you need to take your time and let the blades do their work. We use a couple different materials, and each material saws very differently. So you need to be aware of that as well. So once we glue down the printed out pattern on top of the stack of veneer, you'll notice if you look at the pattern, there's very fine lines. You need to take your time and saw exactly to the lines because we're making each of the component pieces, in a different material from a different stack, and you need them to fit very well together when you're finished.
Yeah, and you can see from the number of pieces that come out using this method how important being organized is at the scroll saw or at the workbench, because there are a lot of pieces to keep straight.
So once all the pieces are cut out of all the stacks and organized carefully, so you know what is what, we usually start with the outside. If we take the elm veneer, that actually frames the outside of our design, and then it becomes more easy to piece in everything else moving in towards the center.
Now that we have the entire pattern dry fit together, we're going to be able to individually craft or cut out the pieces of mother of pearl to fit into the design. The mother of pearl the pieces are too small for us to include in the large stacks as we are cutting, and it also cuts very, very differently than the wood. So you have to sort of treat it separately.
Okay, so now we actually decided to do a little sand shading in this design. The original design we drew from was just a repeating pattern, but where we had reduced it to a single element, we thought that adding a little bit of depth would give it some interest and help kind of pull it together. All right, so sand shading is a technique where you use a pan full of hot sand that you would then dip the pieces of wood in. It works very well on lighter woods, and it will char the ends of it in a gradient. So you get like from very dark towards very light.
Now that the pieces have been sand shaded, we're going to do our final assembly where we're going to take the elm, the holly, the ebony, and the mother of pearl, assemble them all, and back them with veneer tape. After that is a quick glue up, lots of pressure, lots of glue, and after that is removing the veneer tape from the Hero Vault.
So the veneer tape, is a paper tape with a water-activated adhesive. So after the glue up, it just has to be dampened down. Let it sit for a minute, and it will just scrapes right off very easily.
After the tape has been removed, it's off to the belt sander to level the vault and to sand it up.
So now the top of the Hero Vault is going to be wrapped in a binding, which protects the brittle edges of the veneer, from damage. If you're interested in how the binding is installed, we kind of already went into it in an earlier video on the Masterwork Hero Vault, so you can definitely check that out. But this binding was ebony and silver, top and bottom, to create a nice line element around the outside edge.
After the bindings have been installed, we're going to do finish sanding and finishing, which is sort of a whole video in and of itself. But suffice it to say, it went very well. And here we are with the final Dungeon Master Vault. I think it really came out quite well. I enjoy the historical nature of the design. I like that the fact that we're using English wych elm burl. It all sort of ties together to make one successful piece.
Yeah, I like that we had a lot of contrast in materials in this piece, especially the mother of pearl, which we haven't worked with a lot, but it has a depth and luster that really set it apart from wood, and it looks really interesting in with all these others.
Yeah, and I think you did a really great job on the sand shading on the holly, sort of getting this it gives it a sense of movement, a sense of over and under the linear elements as they move around the piece. I think it's very successful. I think this is a very successful piece, and I look forward to seeing the lucky miniature that would go in a piece like this. All right, so that does it for the Dungeon Master Hero Vault. This is Douglas Costello signing out.
Andy and Costello.
Make sure you check us out on Facebook. Give Wormwood Gaming a like if you enjoy this. Share this project with your friends who really enjoy fine craftsmanship or just are really into gaming. Everyone should love it as long as they love one of those two things. And yeah, we'll talk to you later.